Hi, I'm Debbie Sementelli. I'm the co-creator of the Procreate Letter and Composition Design Kit, along with Shoutbam. Welcome to my Give Yourself Permission to Learn series. My goal is to take the fear out of learning something new. So I've done this by creating tutorials that have lots of step-by-step details. In addition, I created a 10-minute preview specifically aimed at newbies to show you some of the actions and tools you'll be needing throughout the tutorial. So this way you can get comfortable with them and maybe even practice them a few times before you start the tutorial. Now these tutorials are included in the Procreate Letter and Composition Design Kit. They were designed by Shoutbam and they're amazing and fun, and you'll learn a lot about Procreate just by going through them. Your tutorials in your kit may look a little bit different than the one that you see on the screen. There are two reasons for this. There are both high resolution and low resolution versions of the tutorials in each kit, depending on how much space you have on your iPad. So that might be one of the reasons they look a little bit different. The second reason is I've been paying attention to your comments and your questions, and what you've shared with me has helped me to go back into the tutorials and change them up a little bit to give them a lot more detail and specific instruction, especially for beginners. But if you just follow along with me, whatever you see on the screen, you'll have no problem getting the results you want. If you have any questions, no matter how small, please leave a comment and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. I want to make this easy and fun for you. So be kind to yourself and give yourself permission to learn. I do it all the time. Hi, this is Debbie Sementelli, and I'm here with my series, Give Yourself Permission to Learn. Today I'm going to go through tutorial number 2, Dimension and Offset Effects, from my Procreate Lettering Composition Design Kit. This was created by both myself and Jimbo and Taya of Shoutbam. Now, before we get to the actual tutorial, I know we have a lot of newbies, and so the very first part is going to go over some of the things you'll be required to do in Procreate throughout the tutorial. So I want to make sure you know how to do them. So that's what I'll be covering first. So if you are not a newbie, then you can fast forward to a specific time when the tutorial will start, and I will mark that time on the screen. But for now, let's go over a few things in Procreate. So you might be required to group some layers. So I have 2 layers here right now that I'm going to be using in the demonstration, and right now they're separate layers. But if I swipe to the right, you can see it becomes highlighted, and I go up here to group, and it now becomes a new group. And I can label that, just rename it, and I'm going to say branches. Okay. Another thing you're going to be asked to do later on in the tutorial is to multiply a layer. So you simply come over to the N, and that stands for normal, and you just move it to the top for multiply. And that simply intensifies the layer. So that is how you multiply. Now, if you needed to move a layer, you can simply press down on it and literally move it where you want it. And you can also do it with your finger. Now let's say you want to copy and paste a layer. There's 2 ways to copy and paste. If we simply want to copy and paste it so that it automatically shows up on another layer, we make sure that the layer is selected and highlighted here. We go to the Select tool, and then down here we just click Copy and Paste, and you go in the layers and you see From Selection, and there's our copy and pasted stamp. Now let's say you just want to copy and paste, let's say this little floral, and I want to put it up here. So similarly, I can just go in real close and use the Select tool click copy and paste, and you'll see it there. And now I can use the arrow tool and simply move it, and I can scale it if I like to, and rotate it. Now let's say that I want to paste this layer on a layer further up. So I'm just going to create a layer up here, layer 59. Now I can't just use the copy and paste, it'll just put it on another layer directly above. So instead, I have to use what's called the 3-finger method. So again, I make sure I'm selected, and I use 3 fingers to swipe. You'll see the copy and paste menu comes up. I simply press copy, and then I go up to the layer that I want it pasted on, and I'm going to hide this layer so you can see how it shows up. Swipe 3 fingers again and choose paste, and there it is. And we'll definitely be using the 3-finger swipe in the tutorial, so that's a good one to know. Now, one of the things in the tutorial will be to either stamp or draw a circle. Now, it's very easy to simply stamp a circle, so you would go to LCDK frames, mixed frame number 15, and I've even given you the brush size. So 32% is what you'll be using in the tutorial, and you simply stamp it and you've already got a circle. But let's say you want to draw your circle. So we're going to grab a brush again, and I'm just using the Debbie brush too. You can also create an ellipse, and same thing, I'm going to tap it. It automatically recognizes this as an ellipse, so that's the only choice that it's giving me. Or I can make a square. Now again, that isn't quite a square, so I'm going to go to Edit Shape, and I can simply tap on Square. So that is how you draw a shape. So next I'm going to show you how to flip a stamp horizontally or vertically. So you can see this stamp right here. We have it on this layer. And so we're first just going to select it. And you'll notice down here you can flip it horizontally or vertically. So what I want to do is get it to be in this direction. So I'm going to flip it horizontally and turn it. Now I'm turning it by using the little green dot and just moving it where I want to. All right, so that's getting close to where I want it to go. Let's move it a little bit more. And I also want to scale it a little bit. So you see I just pull in on one of the corners and I can scale it. So now that I've done that, as you can see here, that second leaf has been taken out. So I'm grabbing the eraser tool and I'm just choosing Debbie Brush 2. Make sure that it's brought down to a size that's going to work. And I simply erase it. And there we go. Now as you see here, we've taken this leaf from this botanical and duplicated it and changed its size to make a filler for the rest of the composition. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So we're making sure that we're on the correct layer. I'm going to choose S, that's my select tool, and it's on freehand. So that's what I want. I'm going to come in real close so I make sure that I get it exactly where I want it, select it, and now I can simply copy and paste it, and you'll see it's on another layer. Now I click on the arrow, which is the select tool again. That's the uniform tool. And I simply move it wherever I want it to be. And you can scale it. And do whatever you want. So now all I have to do is duplicate that layer, and then I can continue to place them wherever I want. Now let's say that you wanted to use a stamp Instead of doing that, you can simply go to the botanicals and you'll find botanical 97. Make sure we have another new layer and just stamp and use that. So you have two ways that you can add a leaf filler. The uniform tool moves everything uniformly, so everything scales up or down at the same proportion. If I want to use the freeform tool, I can move it a little bit differently, so I can stretch it out more one way or the other way. With the distort tool, I can really kind of go to town. You can see how much I can distort it. And of course, the warp tool, with advanced mesh on, I can just move parts of it. So I hope that was helpful in showing you a few more things that you can do and what we'll be doing in the tutorial. Before we begin the tutorial, I'd like to show you a special feature of the Procreate Lettering Composition Design Kit. For each group of stamps, there is a stamp at the top that contains the total of everything that's in that group. So here's an example of the texture stamp, and here's an example of the mixed frame stamp. So all you have to do is identify by the number, and that's how you can find your stamp very easily. I put them together all in one place so you can compare and decide which one you want. I hope that's helpful to you. So that covers all of the things that you're going to do and a little bit more in our second tutorial. I hope it was helpful, but if you have any questions, don't hesitate to comment below and I'll get back with you as soon as possible. So now we're going to start the second of our tutorials. And again, our goal is to create dimension and offset effects that look like this. Now there are two versions of this tutorial. There's a high resolution version and a low resolution version. If you don't have a lot of space on your iPad, you would want to choose the low resolution. I am actually going through the high resolution tutorial. So it might look a little bit differently if you have the low res on your iPad, but you should be able to follow along easily. If you have any questions, remember, just leave a comment below and I'll be happy to get back to you. So the very first thing we're going to do is understand about the outline and solid stamps that I've created. So there are three different groupings of botanicals. So what we're going to be working with are the outline and solid stamps. As you can see, for every solid stamp, there's a matching outline stamp. This is to help you already create dimension with doing nothing else but making them each a different color. So you can see we have that example here, and I'm going to show you on a larger scale here. And you can match it up perfectly, or you can move it slightly to get that offset look. So these are the stamps we're going to be working with in this tutorial. So let's start with step one. In step one, you have the draw or stamp here, an example of some of the frames in the kit, and the guide. So just as I showed you before, you can grab a brush and simply draw a circle and then edit the shape and click on circle and get a perfect circle that way. Or I've noted that you can use the mix frame 15 at 32%, and that will give you a circle. So you simply go to the frames, mixed frame 15, and make sure this is set at 32% and stamp. So that's it. Easy peasy. You have your circle, and that's the very first step. Once you go through the tutorial and you want to experiment a little bit more, you could try some of the frames that we have. There are 135 different frames, partial, mixed, square, and vertical. And if you want to see what is in each grouping, simply click on that particular grouping stamp and you can see them all at a glance, and then choose which one you want and look for the number. So we're finished with step 1. So we're going to click off of that and click on to step 2. Step 2 is simply to try out various stamps. So we've chosen these botanicals to use in our tutorial, but if you wanted to test some other ones out, some different combinations, this would be the space where you could do that. But we'll be using these. So let's move on to step 3. In step 3, you have a stamp here layer, place your container layer, and the example and the guide. Now I've added a demo layer here because rather than stamp out everything one by one, I'm just going to demonstrate a few stamps and then I'll have it all put together right here. So the first thing you want to do is to place your container on this layer. So because I've got this already lined up for my demo, I'm just going to create another layer, but you will be placing your container on that layer that says place your container. So in order to copy and paste the container, so I make sure I've highlighted the layer that I'm copying. I swipe 3 fingers, I click on copy, I go up to the layer and swipe 3 fingers again and paste. And there it is. So basically, we're going to arrange our stamps in the container, starting with our largest stamp, and then we'll go down in size to the very smallest stamp. We've chosen to use the dark green for the outline botanicals, but you can choose any color. And remember, we've got our color palette here, so all you have to do is press on any of the colors you want and they'll show up here. Another thing to note, if you just press on the color dot, you'll see it will switch to the last used color. All right, now we want to put our stamps on separate layers so that we have the ability to move them around. And we're going from largest to smallest. And when you get to that point where you have these spaces, you can do one of 2 things. You can use the leaf from, for instance, this stamp and copy and paste it over and over again and then place it where you want it. Or you can use a small leaf, which is leaf number 97. Either way works. So let's go find our first stamp. We know that it's Outline Botanical 39. So I'm going to go to the botanicals and I simply follow the numbers and there's 39. So I've got my stamp chosen. I'm going to the Stamp Here layer. I've got the color chosen. And if I want to scale it, I simply go to the arrow and now I can make it whatever size I want. Now I'm going to add another layer and let's go to stamp 107. So I simply go back to my botanicals and you can see they're already there. And I'm only using the outline botanicals for this part. So I'm going to place one, I'm going to make it a little smaller. And I'm not worrying tremendously about how they fit. I just kind of want to get them all stamped. But if I just need to make a slight adjustment, no problem. Now, since I already have this stamp on here, I can simply duplicate it and move it to where I want it, to turn it, and I'll probably resize it a little bit. One more adjustment we might make, you'll notice that the leaf on this flower in the example is on the other side. So if we wanted to flip that horizontally, we would simply select on that layer, come up and select the Uniform Select tool and flip it, and then we turn it. And then furthermore, we see that this is interfering with this leaf. So if I want to get rid of that, I simply go to the Eraser tool. I'm still on this flowers layer, so I don't have to worry about erasing anything else. And there we go. And I'll do one more stamp, but I think you're getting the idea. So we'll go to 105. Again, we're just using the outline, and make sure that we've got that in a smaller size. So I can tell already I probably need to adjust the size of this larger stamp just from following this tutorial and how things are fitting. And I might adjust this stamp and move that over. So you can keep adjusting, stamping, and adjusting as you go along. Let's imagine that you have all your stamps in place, and now you're going to group them. And if you remember, you simply swipe to the right so that you highlight all of the layers that you want to group. So we've got our new group and we want to rename it. It's really important to name all of your layers so that you don't get confused. I'm calling this outline stamps because we're going to have solid stamps as well. Sometimes you'll have a stamp that you want to change the shape of. In this case, it's this particular stamp. You can see in the final version, it's much more curved. In order to create that curve, I use the warp tool. And because in step 5, we're going to be adding the solid version of all of these stamps, in order to warp the outline version along with the solid version, they need to be on separate layers. So I come back to my outline stamps group and I have moved them up to the top. I simply selected them, tap or swipe right, and I can move it with my finger and I can place them anywhere I like. So that's what I did. I just brought them up to the top so they're out of the way. Now I want to make sure to deselect them, so I'm not going to mess with them anymore. Instead, I'm going to merge down all of the other stamps onto the Stamp Here layer. And I want to point out, if I wanted to merge the whole group down, I simply tap on it and go to flatten. And that would put all of the stamps on one layer. But I don't want to do that because I've got these two that I'm going to warp later. So let's go back to merging down each of the individual layers. And we just keep doing this. So at this point in step 3, we have our stamps merged down on one layer, except for the two that we're going to warp later. We have our container in place. And as you'll see in the directions, we'll need to move the outline stamps and the container layers to step 4 above the rough color layer. So what we're going to do, we're going to turn off the guides, turn off the example, and we're just left with these layers. So I'm going to select the container and the outline stamps. I'm going to turn on step 4 and open it up, and you'll see it says rough color here. Now for the demo, I actually filled that in, but I'm still going to demonstrate that for you. But what I want to do is I want to move the outline stamps and the container up above that layer. And I've got my outline stamps, and I still have the two stamps that will be warped later. I have the rest of my stamps all merged down on one layer. I have my container and I have my rough color here. And I have the example and the guide. We've already chosen one color for the outline stamps. That was the green. Now we can choose 4 more. Now this is our color palette. You're welcome to use your own. And I just want to give you a reminder that by just placing your finger on any of the colors, it will change the color over here for our brush. Okay. Now we're going to lay in some rough color. And the idea is, as you can see in the sample, don't worry about having it exact. This is literally just giving you a rough idea of where you want to place things. So I'm just going to minimize that. And this is what I chose. I followed the tutorial just to make it easy, but if I wanted to change something up, I could. So all I'm doing is choosing a brush. In this case, I'm going to choose Debbie Brush 2. And I come over here and I choose a color and I say, well, I think I might like to put that color here. So you see, I'm just literally roughly putting it in. I'll make that even bigger. Okay, I kind of like that. Okay, and then I might switch to the yellow. I like the kind of, it's like a daisy, so I like that for the flower. Maybe I'll also make parts of the leaves yellow. Put some yellow here. So that's basically how you lay in the rough color. It's just a guide. And just remember, don't forget to assign color to every stamp. And that is what step 4 is about. It's all about the color. So after we have our rough color filled in, we're going to move our outline stamps and rough color layers to step 5 above the example layer. So I can go on step 4, I'll select outline stamps and rough color layer because those are the ones we're going to move. Now I'm going to move these 2 layers above the example layer. And there we go. Again, I can keep my container visible, but I don't have to move it. Okay, so now we're in step 5. We're going to find the solid version of each stamp and place them on a new layer on top of the outline version in the desired color. So this is a list of all of the solid versions of the outline stamps that we just created. So we're going to go to our step 5, and you will have your rough color there that we placed from step 4 and your outline stamps. I've got a demo layer because I've already created these and I'm going to show you what the end result looks like. So at the end of step 5, you're going to have your solid stamps all merged down on one layer, except for the 2 that we're going to warp. But for now, I'm going to demonstrate what you will be doing. So first of all, we look at our rough color, and we're going to use this to make decisions about the colors that we're going to use for our solid stamps. So the very first stamp is number 38. It's the large botanical, and I'm going to stamp it in yellow because that's the primary color. Now remember, you can just press on the color instead of going back to the color palette, and it will appear there. So we're going to find stamp number 38. So we go to our LCDK Botanicals and simply find the number 38. And there it is. I'm going to come back to my layers. And again, you're going to be starting on the solid stamps layer. I'm doing it on the demo layer. I'm going to click off of the rough color because when I'm going to line up my stamps with the outline stamps, if the rough color's on, it's a little bit difficult. So we're going to go ahead and stamp and adjust, and that looks good. Because we are already using the color yellow, let's see what else in our rough color is yellow. So we've got this flower and this branch. So let's go to this flower, and you can simply refer to the number over here. That's 104. We're going to go back to our botanicals and find number 104. Now we go back and create another layer. Again, we want them all on separate layers. We're going to unclick the rough color so it makes it easier to line it up with the outline layer. Now I'm going to stamp it, and one of the things that can be difficult when you have a botanical that has similar petals is how do you line this up? So a little trick is I look for something that's a little bit different. In this case, this petal's a little bit more rounded, and I can identify that as that petal. So that's where I'm going to start lining things up. And that makes it much easier. There we go. Now we're going to go for the third yellow, and that is number 94. Again, we're going to create another layer, and we'll look for 94 right here. Stamp it, and again, we're going to line it up with the outline. And that looks good there. So let's imagine that we've stamped each of the solid versions of these botanicals on a separate layer. Now we can merge them down into one layer with the exception of the two that we're going to be warping. So I'm going to turn our demo layers off and turn on our solid stamps. And you'll see these are still on separate layers here, and they're also still on separate layers on the outline stamps. So when we warp them, we're going to select both the solid and the outline of that stamp. We're going to click on the arrow for uniform and then switch it to warp and advanced mesh. And now we can go ahead and warp them and make them more curved and extend them. So you can pretty much do anything you want and just get them to where you think they look good. And I think that's working well. So I'm happy with that, so I simply unclick that, and now I'm going to do the other one. So again, I select it. I select the matching outline version. I click on the arrow, and it's already set on the warp tool. I just need to press advanced mesh, and now I'm going to warp this one. So that's looking good. Now that they're warped, I can go ahead and merge them down. And the same thing on the outline stamp layer. Simply merge them down. So there we go. We've got our outline stamps all merged down. We've got our solid stamps all merged down. So we're all done with step 5. So in step 5, we have our solid stamps layer and our outline stamps layer. Everything that we wanted to warp has been done, and we've merged them down to their appropriate layers. So in step 6, we're finally creating the offset effect. Now we're going to use the 3-finger swipe to copy and paste the outline stamps and the solid stamps on the marked layers, then follow the instructions on the left. We're going to select solid stamps, do our 3-finger swipe, select copy, go up to our solid stamp, swipe again, and paste it. And we should be able to turn this off and see that it's on our solid stamp layer in step 6. And now we'll go to our outline stamps, swipe 3 fingers, copy, go to our outline stamp, swipe 3 fingers, and paste. And again, we can turn that off now, turn off all of step 5, and we've got our layers on step 6. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to make the white stamp. We're going to duplicate the solid stamp, paint it white, and name it white stamp, and then make sure that we move it below the original solid stamp. So this is the solid stamp. We're duplicating And so we're going to use this one, name it white stamp. So we make sure that we have the outline on top, then the solid, then the white stamp. So we have outline, solid, and white. And so now we simply have to color this white. I'll turn off the outline stamp. Sometimes I'll notice that it does that when I'm recoloring. It just kind of changes the other colors instead of turning them white. But we just go over it again. It's not a big deal. Okay, so now we have our white stamp, our solid stamp, and our outline stamp. I'll turn those all on. Now we're going to set the outline stamp to multiply. So we do this by tapping on the N, and we move from normal to multiply. And you'll see it has the M here. That means it's set to multiply. Now we select both the solid stamp and the white stamp. So we're selecting both and move them slightly at the same time. So I've selected both layers, click on the arrow select tool, and I'm going to move them slightly. And there you go. And that's how we have our beautiful offset look. So in step 6, I'm keeping on my outline stamp, my solid stamp, and my white stamp, and I've turned off the guides. I want to show you, turn on step 7, and you'll have your example and the guides. Turn off the guides, and what you'll notice is that we have some multicoloring here, and we have some added dots. So the next thing I'm going to do is show you how to do all of that. So temporarily, we're going to turn off step 6, and let's look at the guide in step 7. So now in step 7, you can make all your final adjustments. If you want to add more color or add texture to a stamp or create a clipping mask or add these little dots. So we can do all of this. And on the right-hand side, I have the steps to do each of those things. So if we want to add or change the outline color, which would be the green outline color, you could place a clipping mask above the outline stamp on step 6, but we're not going to do that here. But if you wanted to, that's what you could do. To add or change the color of a solid stamp, you place the clipping mask above the solid stamp layer. Now that would be, in this case, if we want to change this from the yellow to the pinkish purple color. So we are going to do that, and I suggest the dusting powder texture that adds a nice overlay of subtle color in some cases. Now, not for this, but there are some situations where I'm going to show you how to use that. And if you want to add dots, you add them on a new layer, duplicate the layer, change the color of the dots on the second layer. Then you can change the color opacity on both layers. That would be by clicking on that N and then lowering the opacity. Now I'm going to take you through all this, but I just want to go over basically what we're going to be doing. So you can see in the dots how you can see the color behind. That's because the opacity has been changed. And this is where you find the clipping mask. When you're on a layer and you click on it, you will see clipping mask as an option, and you'll know it's on when you see the little arrow there. So we're going to go back to step 6 to add these final adjustments. I'm going to turn off the guides, but I'm going to leave the example there because it's kind of a nice guide to work with. So let's start by changing the yellow color on the stems and leaves to this pinkish purple color. And I like these 3 staying yellow, so I'm going to remind myself to keep those that color. and I can just refer back and forth if I need. So I'm going to add a layer, and I'm going to go over and create a clipping mask. Now I can just go in here, and you can see I don't have to be exact. It will just color the parts that I want it to. So remember, we're keeping that yellow, we're keeping that yellow, and that yellow. So everything else, all I have to do is go over it with my brush. Okay, one thing I want to point out, you can see right here, I forgot to erase that leaf. I erased it on the solid stamp layer, but I forgot to do it on the outline stamp layer. And that's another good reason why we keep them on separate layers. So I just have to be a little bit careful because I don't want to erase this line as well. So we've got that part colored. Now let's change to this color. And again, we're on the same clipping mask. So I just go in here, make that a little bit bigger. I don't have to worry about being very careful, except I don't want to get on the leaves there, because the clipping mask is doing the work for me. It's telling the brush, these are the only parts that you can color. Okay, if I want to put in some of this shadow, I can just change the color like that. We can also come in and add this color to these two leaves. So just use that same color in whatever areas that you've already marked out. And it's all on the clipping mask, on the same clipping mask. Now let's go back to this color and let's change those leaves. Still on that clipping mask. And one of the things that I've really found enjoyable is Jimbo and Taya of Shoutbam, who are the collaborators with me on this kit, they created these tutorials, and it's really fun to discover how they do things because they think very differently than I do when it comes to using color. And I'm really enjoying learning how they use color. It's much more interesting than what I traditionally do. So it's been really fun to just learn from them. I love to give myself permission to learn as well as giving others permission to learn. I think when you do that, it just takes the stress out of the situation. Now you can see that's starting to look very similar to what Jimbo's created. I will add the dots next, but first I want to show you something that I think is kind of fun. So we have this orangey color, and if we go to the textures and you go to that dusting powder, it's kind of a fun thing to just add some slight change of color because the dusting powder is very subtle. I don't know if you can see how that is changing slightly. So it really allows you to do some nice shading and add a little bit of color in some places. And this is not something that Jimbo did in his original drawing, but I think this is something I like to do, and I thought you might enjoy it as well. So I really love this dusting powder texture that I'm using. I think it just can give you a lot of dimension and interest. Okay, so now we're going to add our dots. So I'm going to create a totally different layer, and you can just create a dot. So I'm just going to go to the brushes, and I'm going to make it very small. And I'm just going to start off by creating a circle. Remember how to draw a circle. I draw it and it creates a shape, and I can edit it and make it more of a perfect circle if I want. And now I'm going to fill it in. And there we go. So pretty much I just need one circle, and then I can start duplicating it and moving it around. So I'll put one there. Okay, so now I have all my dots placed. So now I can actually just group them all and flatten them. And now change the colors of some of them. Now you'll notice that Jimbo actually has like this darker green color, and I kind of like that. So I'm going to do that as well. I kind of like how he's got that color in there. And let's add one up here. Let's put in some of the pink. So now I can take this group and duplicate it, and also lower the opacity, and then slightly move it. And now I can go in to the second layer, and I can change some of these. And that's where you're going to get some of that overlapping color that's really cool. So that's how we did our dots. It's not exactly the same as Jimbo's, but I think it works fine. And I hope you had fun going through this tutorial. I know it can be a little bit tricky. Believe me, I'm learning along with you. And I really would love your feedback. I'd love to know if the process was easy enough for you to follow, if there's any ways that I can improve that would help you learn better. Please let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed it and you felt like you learned a lot, I'd love to hear that in the comments as well. Now let's take a look at the end. And the whole concept of this tutorial is that you can take any kind of design that you create, and then you can use it on products that you can sell in your shop. So please tag us. We'd love to see your work. Thanks so much for watching this tutorial. I hope it was helpful, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.